Anthony Richardson has his best overall practice yet with the Indianapolis Colts. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you all for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am Zach Hicks, joining you from Jake's office. This is my new bedroom for the week, so clearly I am out in Indy. I was driving all day long, though, so I was just not really tuned in to what was going on with Colts practice. But luckily, we have Horseshoe Huddle's boots on the ground. Our Colts aficionado, Jake Arthur. He was there at practice while I was making the long trek across the country to come out here and get ready for the rest of the week. So on today's show, we're going to lean into Jake's knowledge, especially when it comes to the Colts offense, then jump into the Colts defense today from practice. And then we're going to close it off with some questions you guys have. And if you guys don't have any questions because it's so late at night, which I completely understand, we'll talk about our winners of training camp so far. But some news and notes before I kick it to Jake and let him, take over this podcast, basically. Yesterday, when we did not record because there was no practice, running back Kenyon Drake was signed, veteran running back with over 3,000 yards rushing in his NFL career, spent time, I think, with the Dolphins, Cardinals, I want to say Raiders and Ravens last year. I think those are the four teams. So if you guys are big Immaculate Grid fans, that's a good name right there. Yeah. Drake. They also signed tight ends Michael Jacobson today and Nick Eubanks. They placed rookie offensive tackle Jake Witt on injured reserve and wide receiver Ethan Fernia on injured reserve as well. Those were two guys that we thought, could be competing for bottom of the roster spots. Now are going to be out for the entire season. And then they waived running back Toriano Clinton, which I feel real bad for. I think it was Joel Erickson that wrote the whole piece on him.
I joked with him today. I was like, thank God you got that piece out in time, man.
But yeah, Toriano Clinton was waived. I'm sure the Colts will look at him in the future if there's any other injuries there. But Jake, getting to Colts practice now, what did you see from the Colts offense? In my limited time seeing Twitter and seeing updates from practice, it looked like Anthony Richardson was just dealing tonight.
Yeah, this was actually a lot of practices have started to get kind of ho-hum, like they're starting to kind of roll together, but this one stood out today. So Richardson, two practices earlier this week, once the full pads got on, I don't want to say full on struggled, but they were not his most crisp practices. His accuracy was kind of scattered. He struggled with timing and anticipation, and it was just totally different today, which is great because we've also been wondering how is he going to respond to any poor performances. And so through two practices ago was like the real rough one. He was like 5 of 13 or whatever. The last practice, statistically, he was better, but still had some issues with the timing anticipation. Tonight, he was ripping it. Came out in his first session of 11s and was 5 for 5. Had a long catch and run touchdown to Amari Rodgers. Okay. And he was just slinging it everywhere. It was beautiful. I don't know if it was because like no one really noticed that there were two live sessions going on at the same time because Gardner Minshew and the ones were over on one field and Richardson was on the other because they were inside, so you can kind of isolate a little bit. Yeah. But he was just dealing. And, the arm strength was, again, that's something that's never going to not be on display. But the timing anticipation was a whole lot better this time around, which it's got to be kind of a breath of fresh air because those are two areas he has had some issues with recently. So big check mark for Richardson tonight.
That's good. I mean, again, it's all about stacking positive days, or what would Frank Reich used to say, climbing that mountain and getting over that mountain, stuff
Get
like
1% better every day.
Yeah, 1% better every day. Keep climbing that mountain, stuff like that. That's what it's really about, though, in training camp. We're not asking Anthony Richardson to come out here and look like Josh Allen, the current Josh Allen, in his first training camp. But it's just about making sure that the next day is always better than the last day. Or if there is a bad day, bouncing back from it the next day there. So
Mhm.
young quarterback Anthony Richardson, even though it was with the twos, he was still
Yeah.
playing with twos alongside him though. So it's not like he was with the ones feasting on twos on defense.
Right.
He was playing alongside the twos and looking really good out there. You did mention wide receiver Amari Rodgers though. The guy that they claimed earlier this week from the Houston Texans off waivers. I saw he had a pretty good day. And then Josh Downs as well. I started seeing his name pop a little bit more.
Yeah, a couple smaller guys who can run after the catch. But no, Rodgers had that touchdown I mentioned with Richardson in the first session of 11s. He then had another one later with Sam Ehlinger at quarterback. It's pretty much the same thing. Took like an intermediate catch, turned it upfield for a long catch and run touchdown. So he's a really interesting player because he was pretty highly, very heralded coming out of Clemson into the NFL. When he got to the Packers, just could not hang on to the ball whatsoever.
Yeah,
he had talent, but if you're a receiver or a return man, you can't hang on to the ball. It's useless. You know what I mean? So if he's able to secure the ball and keep making plays in the summer, he becomes a really interesting player because there is room for a 6th or 7 is probably pretty rich, but there still seems like a spot at the bottom of the receiver depth chart for the Colts. So he's obviously pretty intriguing. And then Josh Downs, I felt like he was a lot more involved during 11-on-11s today. He normally looks nice and crisp during positional drills and stuff. Maybe get some catches during 7s. But both Richardson and Gardner Minshew had passes to him tonight, multiple passes. So he looked pretty good there as well.
That's good. That's good. Now, what else you got for me today from this practice, though? We talked receivers, we talked quarterbacks, we have running backs or O-line stuff to talk about?
Yeah, so earlier in the week, we spoke with Quentin Nelson. And, from an outside perspective, someone not being in the team, it's like, how do you judge the performance of an offensive line when they're not like facing an actual opponent, live tackling, all that stuff? And Quentin said one thing they do is like, how are the running backs, what's the space we're creating for them? Are they getting to the second level? How far are they getting downfield before they're touched? And tonight there were a lot of big runs. Maybe it wasn't like super consistent, but like there were numerous instances of wide open holes. And, Deion Jackson had one, Jake Funk, Evan Hull had one. So I'm pretty encouraged by the performance of the offensive line. And after practice, we spoke with Kenyon Drake, who of course just got signed 24 hours ago. And someone asked him about playing alongside mobile quarterbacks. Like he's played with Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, Tyler Huntley, those guys. And he said, this obviously alludes to Anthony Richardson being his new quarterback. But he said playing alongside guys like that as a running back, it makes the holes enormous.
Yeah.
And then so if you've got the Colts offensive line opening adequate holes already, and you're playing alongside a genetic freak of a quarterback, like the running game for the Colts with or without Jonathan Taylor might be pretty dangerous.
Yeah. I actually have a film room coming up on Kenyon Drake tomorrow morning. So if you guys want to know what my day was like, get up nice and early, drive across the country, write up a film room, and then jump on this podcast with you guys. But I was surprised that Kenyon Drake actually looked more explosive than what I expected. I don't know what I was expecting, but it's like, I was watching it expecting like, a 30-year-old running back to the Colts sign. Like, he's going to be a shell of himself. He's not going to look like the Kenyon Drake we all loved. But when you turn on the film, again, he doesn't look like college Kenyon Drake or anything like that, but he doesn't look like slow. He doesn't look like he's applauding back by any means. Did he actually get out there and practice tonight too? Did you see him out there, or was it kind of a slow day for him?
Well, he did some positional stuff, but he didn't partake in like the 11-on-11s. So we're still waiting to see that from him. But he literally, when practice was happening today, he was on a plane literally 24 hours before that. So I think they're getting him acclimated slowly. Running backs tend to get going pretty quickly in practice. So like with Toriano Clinton, I don't think he really did any of the 11s the day he was signed, but then started to get some the day after. So by the time you're here at practice tomorrow, I'm sure Drake will probably at least be getting some run with the third team.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they have in plan, like what they have planned for him, because I would say personally the way that I came away with it, and this again, a sneak peek into my film room for tomorrow morning, is I see him a lot like Boston Scott last season with the Philadelphia Eagles, where you're not really getting much of a pass catcher. You're not getting a guy who's going to break a ton of tackles. but he is elusive, good vision back, good moving side to side. He can find those holes and be a good 4.5 yards per carry type of guy at the bottom of your roster. So even if you get Jonathan Taylor back and Zach Moss back, there's still a role for a guy like that at the bottom of the roster. But coming up, guys, we're going to talk about the Colts defense and a surprise young player who's making some waves here in practice. Underdog Fantasy is the easiest place to play fantasy football and the best place for best ball. August is here, and you know what that means, the official start of fantasy football drafting month. Get championship ready for your home league by trying out best ball on Underdog Fantasy. All you have to do is one live snake draft. No waivers, no trades. Underdog sets your best lineup every week. Try it out with Underdog's Best Ball Mania Tournament. The largest fantasy football contest of all time is back and even bigger, with $15 million in total prizes up for grabs, including an absurd $3 million going to the winner. Last year, the winner drafted their team in July, so don't wait around. Visit UnderdogFantasy.com or find them in the App Store and sign up with the promo code LOCKEDON to get your first deposit doubled up to $100. That's Underdog Fantasy promo code LOCKEDON. And everydayers, we're going to be coming back to you again every single day this week to talk Colts training camp. Jake and I are going to have to do some finagling to get us both on the screen or do something crazy.
I have ideas.
Yeah, we have some fun ideas. So you might see more of our bodies too on the videos, which, we're going to have to work out a little bit, Jake.
I don't like that idea.
But make sure you guys are joining us here on YouTube and obviously wherever you check out your podcast on audio for all your training camp coverage. All right, Jake, so diving into the defense, I want to do our Shaq report and a bunch of other big things we want to talk about here, but I keep seeing that Nick Cross thing there, and I'm hoping this isn't like an AQM thing where you're just messing with me, but, Nick Cross and pressing, that is huge. That is absolutely huge when we're talking about the potential this player has. So what did Nick Cross do today in practice that caught your eye?
Yeah, so first and foremost, he's running with the ones, right? And sorry for all the ding-dongs. I literally don't know what is going on out there. No, so Nick Cross he affected the game in multiple ways tonight. So he had a nice pass breakup against Kylan Granson, who has been easily the biggest standout tight end of camp so far. He had a big hit against Josh Downs along the sideline. And he also flushed Gardner Minshew out of the pocket and looked like he was going like a cheetah chasing down, I don't know, a rhino.
An injured baby antelope.
Yeah, a much slower animal. So he had a would-be sack coming on a safety blitz, which I commented the other day he had a safety blitz that looks like it would have got home too. Nice pass breakup, big hit. That's what happens when a player is playing confidently. Yeah. He's not overthinking things. He's got his assignment and go. And so we're seeing Nick Cross get really, really comfortable here, and all his coaches are saying really good things about him, which is not necessarily the same thing as last year. And so they've got a real conundrum on their hands when Julian Blackman gets back. Yeah,
I think one of the most important quotes I think that you've said, that a coach has said, on this podcast this year is when I think it was Steichen that you said on our last episode, said that Eric Johnson needs to do what Nick Cross is doing, in order to get.
I think it might have been
Gus. Okay, Gus. That, yeah. Okay, that's huge. If you're saying other young players need to take after Nick Cross after the year he just had last year, that is amazing to hear. So I hope Nick Cross can keep this up because the sky is the limit for his ability. Again, if you're talking like an Anthony Richardson type of prospect at a different position, I mean, Nick Cross is a superb athlete, just so young and just needs to get out there. I really hope that he's able to put it together this year. Another promising young player returned to practice. So that's going to be JuJu Brents, rookie cornerback, made his debut practice. How did he look out there? Did he even get any 11-11 time, or was it mostly just positional stuff?
He actually did get out there for some live team drills. Not a lot, like a handful of reps with the 2s and 3s. But I mean, it was enough. It was his first practice altogether because he wasn't out there during the spring either.
Right. And
I thought it was pretty funny. Like when he was matched up with the 2s, he was up against Mike Strawn, and I was like, that's just two dudes who are like the counterpart of each other, right? Like, yeah, they're two huge gangly guys just going up against each other. He didn't get any passes thrown his way or anything. So, I mean, his coverage looked fine. There was one where I think Ashton Doolin kind of left him in the dust, but was like his first rep that I noticed. But overall, I mean, it seemed to go pretty fine. But again, just a handful of snaps for him. But that's what they needed to do, is just get him on the field initially. So now if he can start stacking some positive days, we'll see if he does become that number one outside cornerback.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, there's still room for that. I mean, we know that Darrell Baker Jr. has had a great camp so far, but the Colts haven't made the investment in Darrell Baker Jr. that they have in JuJu Brents.
Yeah.
So that door is still wide open.
Yeah, the biggest thing I'm curious about is when Darius Rush and JuJu Brents are like really caught up to speed and they're like really practicing, do they overcome, or do they kind of take over for Darrell Baker Jr. and maybe even Dallas Flowers as well? And they both kind of become the starters, or they work in more of the starters, or do those two guys who are having really strong camps, Dallas Flowers and Darrell Baker Jr., do they continue running with the ones and kind of give some time to those young rookies to acclimate themselves? So that's going to be a really interesting storyline to watch there. Obviously, we have to get to our Shaquille Leonard update. I heard that he was out there with the ones during 11-on-11s today, which is a huge step forward for his progress out there.
Yeah, but he had been out there when camp started and they didn't have pads on yet, and it was just shells and helmets and shorts basically. But tonight was the first time that he has been out there with the ones during 11s during full contact. So that's a really good sign, and he wasn't really shying away from it either. I think he was kind of picking on the little guys a little bit with like Jake Funk. Like I think he was chirping at Jake Funk a little bit, which I'm absolutely in love with. An all-pro like Shaquille Leonard, like still needing to chirp a little bit with someone like Jake Funk. Like that's very Shaquille. Yeah, that's very on brand. I loved it. But no, I mean, he talked after practice and he basically said like physically he's cleared to do all that, of course. They're just kind of like ramping him up a little bit. So I don't know that I wouldn't call it a setback if he doesn't do it every day that they're in full pads, but like they're building up to, get him back to where his old level of participation was. And tonight was a pretty big step in that right direction.
Look, if you told me coming into the training camp that this is where we'd be at with Shaquille Leonard right now, I'd be over the moon, because we had a whole podcast talking about the injury risk with him, his injury history, and just why we were concerned. And to hear that he's on the field and practicing, like, I don't even want to be like looking back at our old podcast and be like, oh, those idiots or anything like that, because we were just concerned. We weren't even saying he was never playing again. We were just terrified. We had no clue what was going to happen. So to hear that, a week and a half into practice, he's out there running with the ones in 11-on-11s and being physical, that is such a massive step forward for Shaquille Leonard. And the Colts need him out there. Like, just point blank, they need him out there. So that's great. We're going to keep it in the linebacker group, though, and talk about our camp hero so far. You and I always fall for some linebacker. Yeah, we always do. Sterling Weatherford, Forrest Ryan, JoJo Doman last year. This year, though, Seguna Luby, man. Seguna Luby. I think that's how you say his name. Seguna Luby.
That's how I say it.
He is such a fun player. I was actually watching some of his college film the other day, because I keep writing these like little articles based off guys that you talk about on the podcast here, Jake. And he's just a wrecking ball, man. He's a little like 6 foot, 220, 230 pound wrecking ball. And I heard he had a couple big hits in practice again today, right?
Yeah, he's only got one speed, man. And I think for all you watching, you're going to absolutely love what you see from him in the preseason, because like you're supposed to try hard in the preseason. You're supposed to try in training camp and everything when you're a bottom of the roster guy. This guy is playing every day like it's the Super Bowl. Like he was treating Evan Hull tonight like Hull insulted his mom or something. Like he was a heat-seeking missile for anyone with the ball, and unfortunately for Hull, it was him like twice. Like he hits really hard. That's not the first day he's done it. He's done it like a couple other days in practice. He had the biggest defensive play of camp so far when Minshew threw the very first interception at camp. It was one of those plays where the blitzer is flying up on the quarterback and he's only a couple yards away, and the quarterback throws it right into him as he's leaping. That is almost never intercepted, but Luby held on to it and trotted it in for a short little pick six. So the guy's got some talent. He's explosive. He's a little undersized, but he's aggressive and hits hard. And he's at least got some hand-eye coordination if he's able to come down with an interception like that. So whether he makes the roster or not, I think he's going to be an absolutely beautiful preseason player that everyone's going to love. If you guys remembered Enoch Mwamba from a few years back, the CFL linebacker the Colts had, I'm getting big Enoch Mwamba vibes from him. I dig it.
I was actually about to throw out even bigger compliment towards him, but he sounds a lot like a young Zaire Franklin in a lot of ways with that.
Okay, that's probably better than what I said.
But I'm just saying, like, the undersized guy who flies around and just hits like a truck. I mean, we saw with Zaire Franklin in his early days with the Colts where, he actually came out and started his first year, but after that, he was more of a special teamer. And every time he hit somebody, they were flying across the field. We saw it last year too, when he got out there as a starter. But obviously, Seguna Luby has a way to go to be what Zaire Franklin is. But I kind of hear that archetype with him so far. And it sounds like he's kind of doing all those things that Franklin was doing early in his career.
Yeah, now that you say that, that's a pretty good comparison. I mean, he's not 167 tackle Franklin, obviously, yet, but maybe in the preseason. We don't know.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Coming up, guys, we're going to open it up to a little bit of your guys' questions. And if you guys don't have a ton because it's late at night, then we will talk about some of our winners here in Colts training camp. All right, Jake. So I think I saw one question here. So we'll go to this one question here. If you guys have more questions, we'll try to circle back to them. But DSG Goodbar had a really good one here. How do you think Steichen will use Anthony Richardson in the preseason to get quality reps and avoid injuries with him and others? I think it's a great question because obviously you don't want to show too much of your hand in the preseason, but you do want to get Richardson some kind of quality reps and some kind of reps that he will need to see in the regular season just to get like his legs under him and get going a little bit. So I do think we'll see a little bit of, some play action, some bootleg stuff just to get him moving and looking comfortable like on the run. I'm assuming they'll probably mix in like 1 or 2 QB runs in the preseason just so he can get a quick knock and get a hit under. Like, you kind of have to get that first NFL hit on you.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you want to get him all lined up and squared, but if it's something like a read option, he's running towards the sideline and someone gives him a little ding as he's getting near the sideline, like that's fine. Like just get him a little bit of contact, but it doesn't need to be too much there. But I think it'll be like a very simplistic, typical preseason type passing game. Not too much of him running. I don't think he'll play too much overall in the preseason either. But I think they'll be careful with it. Like it's the preseason. We kind of know what it is right now. It's very vanilla. It's not really designed to get people like ready schematically for the season, but mostly just, get your legs under you, get ready for what it means to like call plays and get out there on a football field and, take a couple really small hits just to, just to get your body ready to take some hits in the regular season.
I'd agree with that. I'm kind of picturing a similar role with what they've done with Sam Ehlinger the past couple preseasons. Like when you have a guy that can move, it does make them more comfortable for those bootlegs and things like you mentioned. And with Anthony in particular, he seems to do best when he's not just standing there stationary in the pocket. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And to get hit, of course, as well, because like you can't get hit in practice. You want to know what it's like to be hit by an NFL player. Yeah. So it's not some big shock if you're starting week 1. But yeah, they're not going to do a lot of exotic stuff. They wouldn't if it was Aaron Rodgers back there. So, I mean, it'll be very basic football, but I think they'll try and get him out moving a little bit, like you said.
Yep. It'll be a lot of Sam Ehlinger this preseason.
Yeah.
It's going to be a ton of Sam Ehlinger, which means if you guys are going on FanDuel or Underdog Fantasy, you're betting on preseason games, Ehlinger throwing for over 300 yards a game might be a thing. Like
nice plug.
Look at me go. We had a couple questions about Ethan Fernia here. We did talk about at the top of the show. He got placed on IR. I don't think they disclosed what it was. But
no, not yet. And we didn't ask about him today because we had a few other people to ask about. They've, of course, got kind of a laundry list of injuries right now. But I never noticed Fernia getting hurt in the last practice or anything. He actually he's always quite involved with a lot of the things they do. So I never saw him get hurt, but we can certainly ask Shane about that next time we talk to him.
Yep, wide receiver who's competing to be that 6th guy, be their next Ashton Doolin type, special team guy that can play a little bit on offense. But It'll have to wait until next year, or, again, if he goes on IR, the Colts might waive him with an injury settlement. So we'll have to see what happens with that. But they could keep him throughout the whole year just on that IR there. So we'll have to watch that here. We did get a question about Darius Rush. How has he looked since returning to practice? I know he's got 2 practices under his belt now.
Yes, I think he was out there the first couple practices maybe, but he missed the most recent few.
Okay.
But he's been back now for a couple, and he's looked fine. I haven't noticed anything like drastically positive or negative. They've only done like 1 round of one-on-ones in the past like week, it seems like, at least the past few practices. So that's one area you can kind of gauge. But no, he's looked fine. There haven't been like the interceptions and like big pass breakups quite yet. But he's not getting burned either. So
yeah, that's good. That's good. We got one more question here, and this can kind of segue us into a couple of our camp stars. But any more Darrell Baker Jr. moments? If not, he's still a training camp star for us right now. Like he's still doing great.
No, he's been fine. The quarterbacks were super efficient today. I had both Richardson and Minshew as 9 of 11. So the quarterbacks couldn't do much wrong today. They were kind of taking a lot of what the defense gave them. Especially Minshew. He always tends to do that, but nothing new outside of what we've reported recently. He had the interception the other day, which was nice. Really breaking in Richardson giving him one of his first interceptions. But no, nothing spectacular today. The defense wasn't bad. The quarterbacks were just like pretty good today.
That's good to hear. You know what? Good offense wins every time. So let's have the good offense here. I did say we're going to segue into some winners of camp so far. We were going to do a whole show on this the other day, but with camp continually running, we have to kind of bunch a couple of topics together. So we've mentioned Seguna Luby. We've mentioned Darrell Baker Jr. Those are 2 massive winners so far throughout training camp. But who are some other guys you have on your short list, Jake, that have just really rised above expectations so far in training camp? And even if they're just fringe roster guys, they are fighting their way up to more favorable spots in that battle.
Yeah, so this guy has a hiccup right now, but Will Mallory, I mean, he was back out today, I think, with a foot injury. So he had strung together a couple nice days since returning from a foot injury. So we'll see how quickly he's able to get back. But that's a really hotly contested tight end room right now. And outside of a couple guys, we don't know who else is going to make it. But he stood a pretty good chance, still might. We talked about any running back, basically.
That's actually healthy.
Yeah, Deion Jackson, I think, with the Jonathan Taylor situation and Zach Moss injury, it looked initially like it was Deion Jackson versus Evan Hull for like the last running back spot, but now Deion Jackson is RB1. So he's kind of lucked into that, but he's had a nice performance. Like, it's not like he just failed up or anything like that. Let's see. Arlington Hambright, I think the fact that he's run exclusively with the 2s at left guard and left tackle has been nice. Now that Jake Witt is out, he remains the second team left tackle. So that's very valuable. Let's see who else we've got. McTelvin Agim, we've talked about him quite a bit. Nick Cross, one of the biggest winners, because golden opportunity with Julian Blackmon being out like the entirety of training camp so far. And he's done nothing but respond positively and had good things said about him from his coaches.
That's so good to hear. That's the biggest one out of all those guys, even though he was probably going to make the roster regardless, like the 3rd round pick. There's still a lot of potential there, but hearing him take that next step is huge. There's one more player that I want to throw in there that I know we've talked about quite a bit, but I just want to make sure his name was in there. But Vincent Smith at wide receiver. I've heard a lot of good things. You've mentioned a lot of really good things. 27-year-old wide receiver, big guy who's making plays every day. And you said he made a couple plays tonight as well, right?
Yeah. So him and Anthony Richardson have some pretty good chemistry, especially in the big play department. Like if Richardson's going downfield, more often than not, it's to Vincent Smith. They had 2 downfield back shoulder catches tonight, which were pretty nice. And again, I've talked about, like, no one really expects Vincent Smith to make the roster, but if that's who Anthony Richardson has like the best chemistry with, then what do you do about that when you're chopping guys? Like, you're looking at the last roster spots. special teams obviously factors into it as well. So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's all we have for tonight, guys. Appreciate you guys jumping on with us in this later show. I mean, almost 200 views in here. Like, you guys are just in here watching, and it's what, 10:30 at night. Like, I don't know about you guys, but we're old men. This is late for us, so we appreciate you guys jumping on. Again, all you awesome everydayers, we'll be back every day this week talking Colts training camp. Jake and I will be together all week, which will be fun. We're in the same room, being able to talk about training camp, give a lot of updates for you guys. So if you guys don't already, make sure you are following at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur, and at Zach Hicks 2, all on X, the best social media app ever. Also subscribe to Locked On Colts podcast on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. We love your guys' ratings, reviews, and we'll see you guys back here tomorrow.